Two motorcycles can leave the same dealership in the same year with the same engine, the same frame, and the same factory paint. One ends up on Facebook Marketplace at 22,000 miles with the words, "needs a little work." The other rolls past 198,000 miles with the original engine still sealed and the owner still riding it to work on Monday morning. Most riders think the difference is brand, luck, or whether the bike was Japanese, American, German, or Italian. It usually is not. The difference is what happened on the boring days, the 30 minutes after a wet ride, the fluid nobody changed because it still looked clean, the bearing nobody checked because the bike still went straight, the battery that sat all winter slowly killing itself. The motorcycles that last forever are not always babied. A lot of them have been ridden hard. They were just never ignored in the quiet places where motorcycles actually die. The oil interval lie. Everybody changes engine oil. That is not the secret. The secret is knowing when the manual is talking to an average rider and when your motorcycle is living a harder life than the manual assumes. You sit in traffic in July with heat pouring off the cases. You take short rides to the store where the oil barely gets hot enough to burn off moisture. You load the bike with luggage and hold 75 for hours across an interstate. Or you ride a high-revving sport bike where the oil is not just lubricating the engine, it is also being beaten through the transmission gears and clutch plates. Oil lubricates, cools, cleans, and holds contamination until it gets drained out. Heat breaks down additives, fuel dilution thins it. Moisture turns into sludge. Gear shear can reduce viscosity in bikes that share engine and transmission oil. And the problem is that oil does not always look terrible when it is stopped protecting well. The high-mileage owner does not treat oil changes like a religious debate. He knows the manual interval, then adjusts for use. Hot climate, short trips, heavy loads, aggressive riding, long storage, or lots of clutch work usually means shorter intervals. Not because the factory is stupid, but because the factory is writing one recommendation for thousands of different riders. The real mistake is not going 500 miles over. The real mistake is never thinking about how the bike is actually being used. The bike that makes it to 200,000 miles usually has boring oil history. Correct spec, good filter, consistent interval, no mystery fluids. Just fresh oil before the engine ever gets a chance to complain. The brake fluid clock. You come down a long hill, roll into a gas station, and something smells hot. Not engine hot, brake hot. You touch the rear rotor carefully, and it is warmer than it should be. The bike still stops, the lever still feels mostly normal, so most riders keep riding. That is how brake neglect hides. It starts with a caliper piston that does not retract quite as cleanly as it used to. A pad drags lightly. The rotor heats up, the fluid sitting near the caliper gets hotter than it should, and on the wrong downhill, with the wrong load, on the wrong day, that heat can turn a small maintenance mistake into a serious problem. Brake fluid pulls moisture from the air over time. It can do that through rubber hoses and seals, even when the system looks closed from the outside. That moisture collects where you least want it, down near the calipers and ABS components. It lowers the boiling point of the fluid, and it corrodes the inside of expensive parts you cannot see. The fix is cheap. Flush the brake fluid on the schedule your bike calls for, and for a lot of riders, that means every 1 to 2 years, depending on the machine and the fluid. If the bike has ABS, do not ignore the ABS side of the system. On some bikes, that requires a specific procedure or diagnostic tool. On others, it is simple. Either way, the fluid is not lifetime fluid just because the bike still stops. The valve drift. This is where a lot of experienced riders get caught, because the bike still starts, still idles, and still pulls. Nothing feels broken. That is exactly why valve clearance gets ignored. On engines that require valve clearance checks, there is a specified gap in the valve train. Sometimes it is adjusted with screws, sometimes with shims. Sometimes it is buried under enough bodywork to make the job annoying before it even starts. That tiny gap controls whether the valve fully closes and transfers heat into the cylinder head. Over time, many engines see exhaust valves tighten up as the valve and seat wear. When that happens, the valve can spend less time fully seated. The rider does not hear it. There is no warning light that says, your exhaust valve is running hotter than it should. The bike may feel normal until compression drops, starting gets harder, or a leak down test tells the truth. A tight valve is not just a measurement problem, it is a heat problem. If the valve cannot shed heat properly into the seat, it runs hotter and hotter until the seat recedes, the edge burns, or the head needs real work. What started as a clearance check becomes parts, labor, downtime, and a very uncomfortable conversation with yourself. This is also where riders fool themselves with brand stories. These engines never need valves. Maybe yours is stable. Maybe it uses hydraulic lifters and has a different service reality. Maybe the last 2 checks were fine. That still does not mean the next one should be skipped if your manual calls for it. The smart habit is not just doing the check, it is recording the numbers. After 3 checks, you start seeing the personality of that engine. Maybe one exhaust valve is slowly tightening. Maybe nothing moves for 50,000 miles. Either way, you stop guessing. The overcharge lie. A rider stops at a roadside diner, comes back out, hits the starter, and the bike acts like the battery just gave up without warning. So he buys another battery. 6 months later, same thing. Then a headlight bulb blows. Then another. Then the bike starts doing weird electrical things that everyone blames on modern electronics. A lot of those problems begin with one part that almost nobody checks until it has already cost them money: the regulator rectifier. Most riders know a charging system can undercharge. They do not think about overcharging. But when a regulator starts failing, voltage can climb high enough to cook the battery while the bike is running. A healthy charging system on many motorcycles will sit roughly in the mid 13 to mid 14 volt range at the battery with the engine running, depending on the bike. If you see sustained numbers around 15 volts or higher, especially when revved, that is not a personality trait. That is a warning. Overcharging kills batteries in a way that looks exactly like a bad battery. The rider replaces the battery and feels productive, while the part that killed it is still sitting on the bike waiting to kill the next one. The test is 5 minutes. Multimeter across the battery terminals, bike running, rev it the way your service manual recommends for a charging check. Watch the number. That little check can save you from buying batteries, bulbs, and sometimes electronics that never needed to be sacrificed. The coolant mistake. You park your bike on the side of the road after a hot ride, look down, and see a small green or orange stain near the bottom of the engine. The first thought is panic. Head gasket. Crack something. Big money. A lot of the time, it is not that dramatic. It is the cooling system telling you it has been treated like an afterthought. Coolant is not just colored water. It is a chemical package designed to manage heat, prevent corrosion, lubricate seals, and protect aluminum passages from eating themselves from the inside. The problem is that coolant can still look clean after the corrosion inhibitors have aged out. It can still be moving heat while becoming less friendly to the water pump, radiator, hoses, and engine passages. The mistake a lot of riders make is topping off with whatever is nearby. Tap water from the garage sink, a universal coolant that may not match the bike, a little bit from an old jug that has been sitting open for years. Then the owner wonders why the water pump starts weeping, the radiator cap gets crusty, or the inside of the system develops deposits. For liquid-cooled bikes, follow the coolant type and interval your machine actually calls for. If the coolant is concentrate, use distilled water, not tap water. If the bike requires a specific motorcycle-compatible coolant, use that. If the bike has been sitting for years, do not trust the color alone. The notchy tell. You take your hands lightly off the bars for half a second on a straight road, and the bike does not feel dangerous. Exactly. It just feels busy. It wanders gently. It wants to settle into one position. At low speed, it feels like the front end wants to fall into the turn instead of smoothly rolling in. So you blame the tire, or the road, or the fork oil. Sometimes all of that is wrong. The steering head bearings live right where the front end meets the frame, and they spend their entire life making tiny movements around the straight ahead position. Hit enough potholes, brake hard enough times, ride enough miles, and those bearings can wear small grooves into the races. Once that happens, the front end wants to drop back into that groove. That is the notchy feeling. That is the little tug you feel when the bars pass through center. The check is simple in concept, though not always simple in access. Get the front end unloaded safely. Turn the bars slowly from lock to lock. Feel for a notch at center. Check for play under braking. Listen for a faint clunk when the fork loads and unloads. Your service manual will tell you the inspection procedure, and on some bikes, the torque sequence matters more than people think. The tired shock. The rear shock dies like an old couch, slowly enough that you do not notice until one day you sit on a better one. At first, the bike just feels a little harsher. Then it wallows slightly in long sweepers. Then bumps that used to disappear start coming through the seat. If you ride with a passenger, the rear feels like it is running out of travel. If you ride a touring bike loaded with bags, the back of the motorcycle starts feeling tired before the engine ever does. Most riders do not think of a shock as a maintenance item. They think of it as part of the bike, like the frame. But inside that shock is oil that gets worked hard and, on many shocks, nitrogen pressure that helps keep the oil from foaming. Heat, mileage, age, and load slowly reduce performance. Some shocks are rebuildable, some are replacement items. Either way, they do not stay new forever just because the outside is dry. Here's why it matters for longevity, not just comfort. A worn shock stops absorbing energy properly. That energy moves into linkage bearings, swing arm pivots, tire carcasses, subframes, luggage mounts, and your spine. A bike with dead suspension beats up everything around it. If your motorcycle has linkage, those bearings need attention too. Grease dries, seals fail, water gets in from rain rides, pressure washing, creek crossings, or sitting outside under a cheap cover. By the time the linkage squeaks, the easy version of the service may already be gone. The hidden driveline. This is where the type of motorcycle changes, but the principle stays the same. Chain, belt, or shaft, every bike has a driveline, and every driveline punishes the owner who assumes it is fine because the bike still moves. On a chain drive bike, the mistake is usually slack and alignment. A chain that is too loose snaps tight under throttle and hammers the sprockets. A chain that is too tight can load the countershaft bearing when the suspension compresses. Riders love to argue about chain lube brands, but many of them never check slack at the tightest spot in the chain, with the bike positioned the way the manual specifies. On a belt drive bike, the mistake is treating the belt like it is indestructible. Belt tension matters, pulley alignment matters, stones matter. A tiny rock trapped between the belt and pulley can start damage that looks harmless until the belt fails far from home. On a shaft drive bike, the mistake is believing low maintenance means no maintenance. Final drive oil, splines, boots, seals, and universal joints still exist even when you cannot see them. A rubber boot with a crack can let water into places where water should never live. A small amount of gear oil is cheap. A failed final drive is not. The wet exhaust. You start the bike in the driveway, let it idle for a few minutes, ride 3 miles to the store, park it next to the curb, buy what you need, and come home. It feels harmless. In some ways, it is harder on the motorcycle than a proper 50-mile ride. Every gallon of gasoline burned creates water as a byproduct of combustion. On a long ride, the exhaust gets hot enough to push that moisture out as vapor. On short trips, the exhaust may never fully heat soak. Water condenses inside the muffler and low points of the pipe, mixes with combustion byproducts, and sits there after shutdown. That is why some bikes rust exhausts from the inside out. The outside still looks decent. The chrome still shines. Then one day, the lowest part of the muffler has a rust bubble or a pinhole, and the owner swears it came out of nowhere. Rust from the inside. This one needs careful wording because not every motorcycle frame is the same, and not every bike should be treated like an old British twin. But on older steel frame motorcycles, bikes that live near the coast, bikes parked outside, and bikes that see salted winter roads, the rust you cannot see can matter more than the rust you can. You can wash the tank, polish the chrome, wipe the forks, and still have moisture collecting in places you never look. Frame tubes, swing arm cavities, center stand pivots, drain holes, lower seams, battery trays, subframe mounts, and the underside of fenders. Water gets in through ordinary life. Rain, condensation, road spray, a night parked on the side of the road under a cover that traps moisture better than it blocks it. The sitting problem. This is the one that ties the whole list together, because motorcycles do not only wear out from being ridden. A lot of them rot from being parked badly. You park your bike for winter, or for the rainy season, or because work got busy. You tell yourself it will only be a few weeks, then you walk past it for 4 months. The tires sit in one position. The battery slowly discharges. The fuel ages. Brake fluid keeps absorbing moisture. Coolant keeps aging. Bare metal keeps sweating under temperature changes. Cables sit with old grease. Rubber hardens on the calendar, not the odometer. A real storage routine is boring, and that is why it works. Correct fuel treatment or draining method for your bike. Battery on a proper maintainer, not a cheap charger cooking it all winter. Tires aired up, ideally moved or lifted if the bike sits a long time. Clean and dry before storage. Fresh fluids when needed. Exhaust protected from pests and moisture. A cover that breathes, not a plastic bag pretending to be protection. The bike at 22,000 miles and the bike near 200,000 may have looked identical when they left the dealership. Same paint, same badge, same promise. One was used and ignored, the other was used and cared for. That is why one became parts and the other became proof.